Imagine the scene. Abraham, a man of unwavering faith, receives a divine command that seems to defy all human logic, to sacrifice his own son, Isaac, the child of promise, the guarantee of his lineage's future. Carrying wood and a knife, he walks silently toward the place of sacrifice, his heart heavy with doubt and obedience. Just when the act seems inevitable, an angel appears at the last moment to stop him, saving Isaac from certain death. But what really happened in that moment? Was it an ultimate test of faith, an expression of divine mercy, or a patriarchal tactic filled with symbolism that transcends the biblical narrative itself? This episode, shrouded in mystery and questions, still sparks debates among theologians, psychologists, and historians today. In this video, we'll dive deep into this intriguing story, uncovering its layers, possible interpretations, and its impact that echoes into modern times. Prepare for a journey that challenges our understanding of the sacred, the human, and the fine line between both. To truly grasp the depth of the episode where Abraham nearly sacrifices Isaac, we must travel back thousands of years to a time when oral traditions began shaping the stories that would become part of the Bible. In ancient times, human sacrifices were, in some cultures, actual religious practices, means to gain favor from the gods, ensure bountiful harvests, or seek protection. Within this context, the story of Isaac's near sacrifice stands out precisely because of its sudden and dramatic interruption, symbolizing a spiritual transition from violence to faith based on trust and hope. Abraham, revered as the patriarch of the three great monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, is portrayed as the model believer, willing to obey God above all else, even if it means giving up what he loves most. The command to sacrifice his son is not just a personal challenge, but a test that lays the foundation for a new covenant between the divine and humanity. What makes this story even more complex is that Isaac is not just any boy, but the heir of God's promise, the symbol of the sacred lineage's continuation. This paradox creates a dramatic and emotional tension that continues to fuel interpretations to this day. Moreover, it's important to consider the cultural context of the time. Similar narratives of near sacrifices, halted by divine intervention, appear in other ancient civilizations, suggesting a broader symbolic pattern. These stories functioned as moral and spiritual lessons, demonstrating that true devotion lies not in the act itself, but in intention and trust in the divine plan. Another crucial angle is the psychological implication for Abraham and his family. From a modern psychological perspective, a father willing to sacrifice his son can be seen as a profound conflict between love, duty, and fear, universal emotions reflecting the complexity of the human condition. Therefore, this episode is not just a religious tale, but a story about the internal struggle between what we hope for and what we are forced to confront. Finally, this chapter explores the roots of this test, challenging common understanding and placing the central theme. Isaac has avoided death, at the heart of a reflection that crosses generations, beliefs, and disciplines. After all, how do we make sense of such an extreme act? And what does its interruption reveal about the relationship between the divine, humanity, and life itself? These questions will pave the way for the deeper analyses to come, where we will uncover the nuances of this fascinating narrative. The dramatic moment when an angel holds Abraham's hand, just as he is about to sacrifice Isaac, has fascinated believers, scholars, and thinkers for millennia. This sudden, almost miraculous intervention raises profound questions. Was it an actual divine act of mercy? A literal supernatural rescue from death? Or could it have been a deliberate patriarchal strategy, carefully crafted to reinforce Abraham's authority and convey a powerful message about faith and obedience? Exploring these contrasting views helps us uncover the rich complexity of this pivotal event and its enduring significance. From the perspective of many religious traditions, the angel's arrival symbolizes the mercy and compassion of God. It transforms the story from one of blind obedience to one of divine grace. The intervention suggests that God does not desire human sacrifice, even if obedience is demanded, underscoring the sacredness of life. The angel's command to stop can be seen as a divine lesson. Faith is about trust, not destruction. This reading positions the angel as a beacon of hope, signaling that mercy can intervene even in the most extreme tests. It's a profound reminder that divine love is ultimately merciful and life-affirming. Yet, beyond the theological interpretation, some scholars argue that the story contains subtle elements of patriarchal strategy. In the ancient Near East, where these narratives took root, patriarchal authority was paramount. Abraham's readiness to sacrifice Isaac may have served as a dramatic demonstration of his unyielding loyalty, not only to God, but to his position as head of his family and tribe. By halting the sacrifice at the last moment, the narrative reinforces Abraham's wisdom and control. The angel's intervention, then, might be a literary device emphasizing that absolute obedience is crucial, but so is the preservation of life and legacy. This perspective highlights the story as a political and social tool that strengthens the patriarch as legitimacy and authority. The psychological dimension of this event is equally compelling. Abraham's inner turmoil caught between divine command and paternal love reflects a universal human conflict. Modern psychology suggests that the angel's intervention could be interpreted as a symbolic resolution of this tension. Whether a literal angel or a metaphorical moment of clarity, it marks the turning point when Abraham's conscience or intuition halts an act that would cause irreparable harm. This interpretation humanizes the ancient narrative, making it a timeless story about how faith challenges the human mind and heart. It shows the struggle to reconcile duty with empathy, obedience with compassion. Moreover, when we look beyond the Hebrew Bible, we find striking parallels in other ancient cultures. Stories of last-minute divine interventions preventing human sacrifices appear across civilizations, from Mesopotamian myths to Canaanite legends, indicating a widespread symbolic motif. These narratives often serve as moral lessons about trust, divine will, and the value of human life. By placing Abraham's test within this broader cultural and symbolic framework, we see that the story operates on multiple levels: theological, psychological, social, and literary. The angel's intervention also raises questions about the nature of divine communication. How does the divine will manifest? Is it always clear and direct, or does it sometimes work through subtle signs, internal voices, or moments of sudden insight? Abraham's experience blurs the lines between external command and internal revelation, suggesting that faith may involve both obedience to an external authority and listening to one's inner moral compass. This moment, frozen in time at the brink of sacrifice, invites us to reflect deeply on the paradoxes of faith. It embodies the tension between death and life, between the harsh demands of obedience and the soft mercy of grace. It challenges us to consider the boundaries of divine will and human understanding. When should obedience be absolute? When should compassion intervene? And how do we interpret the messages that come in moments of crisis? In the end, the angel's interruption is more than a plot twist. It is the heart of the entire narrative. It embodies the central theme of avoided death, a near tragedy transformed into a profound lesson about trust, mercy, and the complex dance between the divine and the human. Whether seen as a literal intervention, a patriarchal narrative strategy, or a psychological breakthrough, it continues to captivate and inspire, urging us to explore the mysteries at the core of faith itself. The story of Abraham nearly sacrificing Isaac is not merely an isolated event. It is a narrative deeply embedded with underlying laws, patterns, and symbolic mechanisms that shape religious faith and human behavior. To grasp its full meaning, We must explore how this test functions within a broader spiritual and psychological framework, revealing the implicit rules that govern faith, obedience, and divine human interaction. At its core, the test embodies the principle of proving loyalty through trial. Many religious traditions use trials as a way to confirm and strengthen devotion. Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son serves as the ultimate demonstration of trust, a belief that God's plan transcends human understanding and even personal loss. This pattern of sacrifice as a test is ancient and universal, signaling a rite of passage that purifies and elevates the faithful. The lesson: true faith demands not only belief, but also surrender, even when the path is shrouded in doubt and fear. Simultaneously, the narrative reveals a deeper spiritual law that sacrifice is symbolic, not always literal. The interruption by the angel transforms the act from a fatal event into a symbolic gesture, one that highlights intention over outcome. This subtle shift introduces a critical pattern. Divine tests may require the willingness to sacrifice, but not the actual destruction of life. This tension between readiness and restraint defines much of religious ritual and ethical reflection, reinforcing that faith is ultimately about inner transformation rather than external acts. The episode also demonstrates the dynamic tension between fear and hope in spiritual experience. Abraham's journey up the mountain is laden with fear. Fear of losing his beloved son, fear of divine judgment, fear of the unknown. Yet this fear coexists with hope. Hope for divine mercy, hope for a higher purpose, hope that the trial will end well. This interplay creates a powerful psychological mechanism. It drives the believer to confront uncertainty and paradox, cultivating resilience and deeper trust in the divine order. Another key pattern is the use of intervention at the brink. The angel's timely appearance is not a random event, but a deliberate narrative device illustrating a fundamental spiritual principle. That divine grace often arrives at the last possible moment, just before irreversible loss. This pattern reassures the faithful that while faith may demand extreme tests, it also promises salvation and mercy before catastrophe. It's a spiritual balancing act between justice and compassion, strictness and kindness. Moreover, the story encodes a law of relational reciprocity between human and divine. Abraham's act of obedience is met with divine provision, the ram caught in the thicket. This exchange symbolizes that faithfulness invites divine generosity and sustenance. It reflects a covenantal relationship where both parties engage in a mutual commitment. Humans offer trust and submission. God offers protection and blessing. This reciprocal dynamic forms the backbone of much of Abrahamic theology. From a psychological perspective, the narrative also illustrates the process of cognitive dissonance resolution. Abraham must reconcile two conflicting realities: God's command to sacrifice his son and his innate paternal love. The angel's intervention represents the resolution of this dissonance, a moment where contradictory impulses find harmony through divine revelation. This mechanism explains how profound spiritual experiences can resolve internal conflicts and foster personal growth. Finally, the story reveals an overarching spiritual truth about the limits of human understanding. The test resists simple explanations because it touches on mysteries beyond reason. The paradox of sacrifice that saves life, the coexistence of obedience and mercy, the tension between fear and trust. These patterns invite believers to embrace uncertainty, cultivating humility before the divine and acknowledging that some aspects of faith transcend human logic. In sum, Abraham's test is a masterful narrative woven with hidden laws and patterns. The proving of loyalty, the symbolic nature of sacrifice, the interplay of fear and hope, timely divine intervention, reciprocal covenant, psychological resolution, and the embrace of mystery. These mechanisms operate beneath the surface, shaping the experience of faith and guiding believers through their own spiritual trials. Understanding them enriches our appreciation of the story and deepens our insight into the timeless dance between humanity and the divine. The pivotal moment when the angel stops Abraham from sacrificing Isaac is arguably the most enigmatic and symbolically charged part of the entire narrative. This singular interruption has sparked centuries of debate. Was the angel a real supernatural being acting on divine command, a literary device crafted to convey theological messages, or perhaps a metaphorical representation of Abraham's own internal moral compass? This chapter delves deeply into this moment, dissecting its multiple layers and examining what it reveals about the nature of faith, authority, and divine human communication. First, the traditional religious view holds the angel as a genuine divine messenger, sent explicitly to halt an act that would contradict God's ultimate will. This interpretation stresses the merciful character of God, one who demands tests of faith but does not desire cruelty or destruction. The angel's command to stop transforms the episode from a story of sacrifice to one of salvation, highlighting that divine love ultimately prevails over harsh obedience. The angel embodies divine intervention at its most immediate and compassionate, reassuring believers that God's justice is tempered by mercy. However, the angel's presence can also be viewed through a literary and symbolic lens. Some scholars argue that the angel functions as a narrative mechanism, a turning point that resolves the tension built up over the story. By introducing an external voice, the text shifts from the internal struggle of Abraham to a divine decree, allowing the story to conclude with a message of hope and promise. In this view, the angel is less a literal being and more a symbolic figure representing the concept of divine mercy interrupting human sacrifice. This device shapes the story's theological meaning, reinforcing the values of faithfulness tempered by compassion. A psychological interpretation adds further depth. The angel might be understood as a projection of Abraham's own conscience or psychological breakthrough, an internal voice that arises at the climax of his moral crisis. Faced with an unbearable choice, Abraham experiences a moment of clarity or revelation that stops him before committing an irrevocable act. Whether perceived as an external messenger or inner insight, the angel symbolizes the human capacity for self-reflection and the emergence of empathy, even amid extreme obedience. This reading humanizes Abraham, portraying his faith as a complex negotiation between duty and love. Beyond theological and psychological perspectives, the angel's interruption has significant cultural and historical implications. In the ancient Near East, stories of divine messengers intervening in sacrificial rites were common motifs used to express the limits of human authority and the supremacy of divine will. The angel, therefore, can be seen as part of a wider symbolic tradition, emphasizing that while humans may be called to extreme acts, divine will ultimately safeguards life and moral order. This places the story of Abraham and Isaac within a rich tapestry of ancient religious symbolism. Furthermore, examining different religious traditions reveals variations in how the angel's role is perceived. For example, in Islamic tradition, the angel Gabriel, explicitly intervenes, affirming divine mercy. In Jewish and Christian interpretations, the angelic figure also serves as a sign of God's grace, but the emphasis may vary between literal intervention and symbolic meaning. These diverse perspectives highlight how the angel's presence functions as a theological pivot point, a moment where divine mercy and human obedience converge in complex ways. The angel's command to stop also raises profound questions about the nature of divine testing itself. If the purpose was to test Abraham's faith, why permit him to reach the brink of sacrifice? The angel's intervention suggests that divine tests are designed not for destruction, but for revelation and growth. It teaches that faith requires a willingness to obey, but that obedience is ultimately bounded by compassion. This nuanced balance challenges simplistic views of obedience and opens space for interpreting divine human relationships as dynamic and relational rather than authoritarian. In essence, the angel's interruption is a multifaceted symbol, a real or metaphorical messenger, a literary device, a psychological insight, and a theological statement all at once. It invites believers and scholars alike to explore the tension between divine command and mercy, obedience and conscience, faith and reason. This moment encapsulates the profound mystery at the heart of the narrative, that faith is not blind submission, but a complex dialogue that includes trust, love, mercy, and sometimes intervention at the very edge of sacrifice. Though the story of Abraham and Isaac unfolded thousands of years ago on a remote mountain, its echoes resonate powerfully in modern culture, theology, psychology, and ethics. The theme of an avoided death through divine intervention has evolved, expanding its influence far beyond its ancient roots to shape contemporary discussions about faith, sacrifice, authority, and morality. This chapter traces how this ancient narrative continues to manifest in modern contexts and explores its potential future significance. In religious communities worldwide, the near sacrifice of Isaac remains a cornerstone story, illustrating faith's demands and the mercy that tempers them. It serves as a profound reminder that true devotion often involves tests that challenge human understanding and endurance. Today, this narrative encourages believers to trust in divine providence amid life's uncertainties and moral dilemmas. It also highlights that faith is not about reckless obedience, but about listening for moments of grace that intervene before irreversible harm occurs. Thus, the story continues to nurture spiritual resilience and hope. Beyond theology, the narrative has permeated psychological and philosophical thought. Modern psychology uses the story as a case study of extreme moral conflict and the human capacity to face impossible choices. The themes of obedience, fear, hope, and mercy reflect internal battles that many individuals experience, from personal crises to ethical quandaries. This story helps frame discussions about the limits of authority, divine or human, and the role of conscience in mediating obedience and compassion. It raises important questions relevant to modern society. When should we obey authority unquestioningly? When must we resist to preserve life and morality? In the field of ethics, the episode challenges contemporary debates about sacrifice and responsibility. The tension between following orders and protecting loved ones mirrors dilemmas faced in military, medical, and legal spheres. The story's resolution, an intervention before the fatal act, symbolizes the ideal balance between duty and mercy, obedience and ethical responsibility. It invites ongoing reflection about the consequences of actions taken under pressure and the moral boundaries we navigate in complex situations. Culturally, the story continues to inspire art, literature, film, and music, symbolizing profound human themes. The test of faith, the value of life, the agony of sacrifice, and the triumph of mercy. These creative expressions reinterpret and reimagine the narrative, making it accessible to new generations and diverse audiences. Through these mediums, the theme of Isaac's avoided death transcends religious boundaries, becoming a universal story about confronting the impossible and being saved by grace. Moreover, the story's influence extends into interfaith dialogues, where it serves as common ground among Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Its shared narrative encouraged mutual understanding, highlighting both the unity and diversity of faith traditions. This dialogue fosters peace and cooperation, showing how ancient stories can shape modern relationships and promote harmony. Looking to the future, the central theme invites us to consider how emerging challenges, technological, social, and ethical, might reflect new forms of sacrifice and intervention. Advances in artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and global ethics pose questions about the limits of human control and the need for compassionate restraint. The lesson from Abraham's test reminds us that while progress demands difficult decisions, mercy and moral reflection must guide our choices. Ultimately, Isaac's near sacrifice remains a living story, evolving yet constant, a beacon illuminating humanity's ongoing struggle to balance faith, obedience, love, and mercy. Its legacy challenges each generation to face its own mountains, trusting that grace will arrive before the final moment. As we conclude this exploration of Abraham's near sacrifice of Isaac, we arrive at a profound and humbling truth. Some mysteries stretch beyond the grasp of human reason and defy absolute explanation. This story confronts us with the limits of our understanding, inviting us to embrace the unknown as an essential part of faith itself. The central theme of a death narrowly avoided, of obedience tempered by mercy, resides at the intersection of the divine and human realms, where clarity often yields to mystery. Throughout history, thinkers, theologians, and believers have wrestled with the paradox of this narrative. How could a loving God demand such a horrific act, only to prevent it at the last moment? What does this reveal about divine justice, human free will, and the nature of faith? These questions resist final answers, suggesting that the story is less about providing solutions and more about provoking reflection, challenging us to sit with uncertainty and the complexities of existence. This enduring enigma highlights a fundamental aspect of faith. It requires trust in what cannot be fully known or controlled. Abraham's journey up the mountain is symbolic of the spiritual path many walk, marked by doubts, trials, and moments of revelation that do not always come with clarity. The angel's intervention is a reminder that even when answers elude us, there is room for grace, compassion, and hope. Moreover, the narrative teaches that divine-human relationships are not static contracts, but dynamic, evolving dialogues. Faith is not blind submission, but an ongoing conversation, sometimes fraught with tension, other times illuminated by insight. This story's power lies in its ability to evoke this complexity, reminding us that the sacred often dwells in paradox and ambiguity. Reflecting on this, we are invited to reconsider our own responses to life's mountains, moments that demand sacrifice, challenge our values, or push us to the edge of understanding. Like Abraham, we may face choices where the path is unclear and the stakes are immense. The story does not offer a blueprint but a spiritual companion, a call to trust beyond certainty and to remain open to intervention, whether divine, human, or inner, that can transform the course of our lives. In the end, the near sacrifice of Isaac stands as a testament to the profound mysteries at the heart of existence. It asks us not only what we are willing to give up, but also how we understand mercy, obedience, and faith. It challenges the limits of human comprehension and invites us into a space where awe and humility coexist. As we ponder this ancient narrative, we are left with a question that lingers. How do we live with the unknown? How do we embrace faith when certainty slips away? The story offers no easy answers, but it holds a timeless invitation to journey onward, trusting that grace will meet us, even at the edge of sacrifice.